You go into your shower feeling, but as soon as you reach for the Irish Spring, your day immediately gets better. That crisp, fresh, unmistakable Irish Spring scent zings your brain and awakens your senses. So when you finally emerge from the shower, 37 minutes later, because you pay the water bill so you can stay in there as long as you want, you're ready to take on the day and smell great doing it. Irish Spring Body Wash and Bar Soap. Fresh, green, Irish. Shop now at Walmart.
From hobby farmers to weekend gardeners and everyone in between, Tractor Supply trusts 5G solutions from T-Mobile for Business to make shopping more personal. Together, we're connecting over 2,200 stores with 5G business internet and powering AI so team members can match shoppers with products faster.
You're all set.
This is enriching customer experience. This is Tractor Supply with T-Mobile for Business. Take your business further at T-Mobile.com/now.
The NFL Draft is now officially open.
This is draft season presented by Moody's. Moody's is a proud partner of the New York Giants. Decode risk, unlock opportunity. Learn more at Moody's.com. I am John Schmeelk, as always, joined by Tony Pauline from SportsKita.com. And we're going to start welcoming some guests over the next couple of months as we dig deeper into the college football season. Today, we'll welcome in front of the program, Kyle Krabs, who has a new gig. He's the new draft analyst over at the 3013. Kyle, it's good to talk to you, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing well. Hope everybody is enjoying the football season, which crazily enough is just about halfway over. And so we're trying to enjoy it as much as we can over here, at least.
Yeah, and you guys are also trying to enjoy the college football season. So, Kyle, let's start with you. Guests get to lead us off here. Any just thoughts that come to mind from the college football weekend that was this past weekend?
I was pretty impressed with how Oregon looked as kind of their first test drive out as the number one team in the country. And they had a good matchup against a pretty solid Illinois team. I thought there were players on both sides of the ball for Oregon that made nice statements to kind of affirm themselves. Oregon's got a pretty deep wide receiver room. But Derek Harmon, the defensive tackle, is kind of the buzzy name right now, at least for Oregon up front. And this disruptive nature that he has, I think, is a healthy addition to the defensive line group for this year's class. So that's a storyline that I'll continue watching that number one Oregon team.
You know, Tony, we haven't talked a ton about Oregon this year, I don't think. Who are some of the guys that jump out to you from there in terms of how they've managed to kind of get on top of the college football standings this late in the year?
Well, I think Gavin Stewart, the Texas A&M transfer, is really starting to kick into gear. Had a bit of a slow start, and he shows a lot of explosion. Obviously, their running back, Jordan James, I should say, we've talked about him before on the show, is just an incredibly explosive ball carrier, can run on the inside, can run on the outside. And then they've got a lot of underrated guys on that defense. Kyle talked about Derek Harmon, but you look, day three guys, Jeffrey Bassa, the middle linebacker, who's a terrific run defender, Nico Reed, a cornerback who shows some skill. I think it's as much Jordan Birch, who we talked about. We hoped that he would have that breakout season. He's been injured, really hasn't played that much recently. Was injured, didn't even play in the Ohio State game. We lost out on that matchup we were hoping to see. I just think that Oregon is a team that is incredibly well coached and just doesn't have any superior talent on it.
Tony, you were in Ohio State. You mentioned Ohio State this weekend.
Yes.
So how was your in-person scouting with your daughter? How'd it go?
Just the opposite, because Ohio State is an incredibly talented team that is horrendously coached as far as I'm concerned. I mean, it was an exciting game, but it wasn't a well-played game. I think, you look at it from the Nebraska point of view, Ty Robinson, the defensive lineman, really good player. I think he's going to be a solid mid-round choice. They move him around defensive end. They put him over the nose on occasion, constantly making plays. Huckmacher, the other defensive lineman, more of a gap occupier, but did a good job. Obviously, the freshman Raiola shows some good signs for the future. It would be nice if Nebraska could get him a running game. As far as Ohio State's concerned, I mean, we'll talk about it later on. Tuimeola, Sawyer, nowhere to be found. Denzel Burke's game has gone south. Tyreek Williams, the defensive tackle, has played very well. And I mean, they don't use their running backs correctly. I mean, it shouldn't have been a close game. Quishon Judkins, they try and run him around the perimeter. He's a downhill between the tackles guy. Travion Henderson, I don't think they gave him enough carries. Really, it's just the opposite of what I see in Oregon, a well-coached team and a guy who gets the most out of his ability. Where with Ohio State, you wonder, why aren't these guys performing to the level that they should be?
Kyle, we joked last year, all those guys from Ohio State went back so they could win the Big Ten, beat Michigan. And I feel like a lot of those defensive guys that we felt so great about maybe have not quite met expectations this year.
Yeah, I think that's a totally fair observation from Tony's standpoint. The talent is obvious. And I know Jack Sawyer started the year really well, but as this schedule has really ramped up for Ohio State, you've kind of felt them hit the slog and just being able to get into complementary game scripts, like just the pass rush group alone and the ability to get up on top of teams and put yourself in a position to really hunt the football and give yourself the chance to fire off the ball. That's been kind of a regular for Ohio State. And that goes back to that game against Oregon too, which was a lot of points scored in that game. And you were hoping with the talent that Ohio State had, those guys would step up and make the play to win the game. And it was the other way around as we've kind of talked about the dynamic of those top two teams, but maybe they're just keeping it all in the holster for when they play Michigan in a couple of weeks. And if you do, then good for you. And then you could check that box. But I would agree with this assessment of Ohio State of the beginning of the year. You knew how much talent they had, and it's really been a matter of them trying to put it all together still.
And remember, these regular season games aren't as important as they used to be with all these teams making the playoffs. You're not going to get the bye, but you get in, and then anything can really happen. All right, Kyle, just let's take a kind of a 20,000-foot view here of the draft class. Mm-hmm. Tony and I haven't done this in a while. Who are the guys that right now, that from guys you're talking to in the scouting community and yourself, you feel really good right now about being top 10 picks?
I don't have 10, which is a bummer for teams that finish closer to 10 than they do to 1. I think you look at the positional value of the quarterback position. I think there's 2 guys that have really separated themselves from the rest of that pack, and just the dire need that exists at that position. I think that Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward is becoming more of a consensus 1-2 punch at the top. Travis Hunter obviously gives so much. Go ahead, John.
No, I was going to say, is that a desperation thing with those 2 guys in the top 10 though, Kyle, or do you actually believe they're top 10 worthy players?
I think when you factor for positional value, would they be at the top of last year's draft class? No. But I do think that they are players that have enough to their respective games that I would not bat an eye at drafting them in the top 10 picks if I were a team that needed a quarterback and they have very different strengths. And I know we're planning on getting into this class as a whole during our time together. But I think about Tet McMillan, the wide receiver from Arizona. If you put Travis Hunter in the wide receiver conversation, you can put him there. If you put him in corner, he qualifies on either side of the ball. For me, is somebody who I feel pretty good about being in that stratosphere. Mason Graham at defensive tackle, Will Johnson, the corner from Michigan, Malachi Starks as a safety, I think is a really safe player and has a lot of versatility, but there's a whole positional value discussion to be had there. The same thing goes for Ashton Genty. So that's kind of where you start running out of names that at least I feel pretty comfortable about saying, hey, yeah, in a lot of draft classes, this guy would be considered or garnered as a top 10 pick.
Tony, what do you think about that group? Would you add or subtract?
I would absolutely add Abdul Carter into that group because I just think he's an explosive impact defensive player who can rush the passer. He's strong for his size. He's also very effective playing off the line of scrimmage. I know people want to broad brush him as an edge rusher, especially this year since he's primarily coming out of the three-point stance. But you look at his entire body of work and, he can drop off the line and play in space on 3rd and 6, or you can rush him up the field as a pass rusher, and he's going to get some results for you. I would agree about the quarterbacks. I mean, I think when you look at Sanders and Cam Ward, from a physical point of view, they both have it. And I think from seeing the field, especially Cam Ward, we've talked about this a number of times, the patience, the poise, the way he's able to respond and come up big when Miami needs it. Again, they both check those boxes, but I think both of those guys have a lot of fundamental flaws, throwing off their back foot, not setting their feet properly, cross-body throws, which you can get away with on Saturday, but it's going to turn into a disaster on Sunday unless they figure that out. I think the X factor, and it's going to be talked about with Shedeur Sanders, is his dad. His dad said last year, there are places where I'm not going to let my son go. We'll see how that plays out. I'm a big fan of Ted McMillan of Arizona. I don't think Will Campbell is a top 10 pick, but I could see a team reaching for the left tackle in the top 10. We've seen it before. I like the cornerbacks, but the cornerbacks, whether it be Will Johnson, whether it be Ben Morrison, have been injured. Will Johnson's been injured. He's supposed to play this weekend. Benjamin Morrison of Notre Dame's out for the year. So, what do you do with those guys?
Tony, I'll even add
go ahead, Kyle. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I didn't name Savon Revel from East Carolina as another name that is out for the season, but man, he's got some really exciting tape as far as the ball skills, the tackling, the length and physicality. So I totally echo those sentiments for you as far as that corner class. It's just a question of, even he's a smaller school player now too, that I think they played Michigan a few years ago, but doesn't have too many big competition marks on his resume and now might miss the whole pre-draft process.
Neither one of you guys mentioned Luther Burden. How close do you think he is to Ted McMillan, and do you think he could creep his way into the top 10 here, Kyle?
I'd be surprised at this stage, and I know some of the production issues aren't his fault with Missouri and the quarterback's now hurt, but I think he's an exciting player who has some growth. I think there's other receivers that have kind of crept up on him. I know the production's not crazy high for Isaiah Bond, but I think Isaiah Bond maybe gives you a more appealing route running profile right now, at least for me, than what Luther Burden does. Now, I like Burden a lot. Run after the catch, especially in today's game where explosive plays have to come with the ball in your hands more so than vertically taking the top off the defense. There's a lot of value there for him. But at the same time, I just don't think he's made that next leap in his game that I think we were maybe hoping for after having such a productive season last year.
And Tony, I remember you told me a couple weeks ago, talking to some scouts, that they would probably still have him in the top 10, but you didn't mention him. So I'm curious to see what your take is on that.
Well, what I said was coming into the season, the 2024 college season, Luther Burden was the highest rated player by scouts who grade seniors and juniors. He had the highest grade. And, the thing with Burden is he's a nice receiver, but he's not spectacular as far as I'm concerned. You look at Ted McMillan of Arizona, he's a game controller. I mean, teams know the ball's going to him. There's really not a lot of other players around him, and they can't stop him. I mean, he is a bona fide number one receiver. As far as Burden's concerned, he's got nice size. He doesn't have great size. He's got nice speed. He's not a true burner. He does a lot of things very well. I just don't see anything spectacular that jumps off the film at me that says, yeah, we're going to take this guy in the top 12, or that I would take him in the top 12, top 15.
Do either of you or both of you have maybe a wide receiver you like that you think is being slept on? Not top 10 guy, maybe not even a first round guy, maybe day 2 guy that you really like that you don't think maybe Kyle is getting enough attention?
Oh man, it's such a hard one to narrow down because you have so many wide receivers that have production and promise. I know Tony mentioned Evan Stewart, the transfer from Texas A&M, supremely physically talented, and I know he's got to share the wide receiver room with Tez Johnson, who just is coming off the big game against Illinois. I think that's one to mention. I think Trey Harris from Mississippi, a little bit more one-dimensional as far as like a route runner and what he brings to the table, but he's got good size. He's explosive. He tracks the ball extremely well in vertical situations to get down the field. So you think about the profile, he kind of parallels what Brian Thomas's route distribution was at LSU. I'm not saying he's Brian Thomas, but he's a guy who runs a lot of goes. He takes a lot of that explosiveness off the line and his threat vertically to take free access and hitches underneath. And then he has some athleticism that he brings to the table as a bigger, like a 6'2", 205, 210 type of guy. So those are a couple names that I would look at and say, hey, maybe these guys aren't in the conversation for top 3, top 5 wide receivers in this class, but guys that I think can be pretty productive players in the right situation.
How about you, Tone?
I'll give you 2 names. Sam Brown, the Houston transfer, who's now playing at Miami with Cam Ward, sort of like Evan Stewart, seems to be getting in the mix of things. Came into the season with higher grades. You compare him to Luther Burden. He's a little bit bigger than Luther Burden. He's sturdier than Luther Burden. He catches the ball extremely well. He's probably as fast, and if he's not as fast, he's maybe slightly a quarter of a step slower than Luther Burden, but he's a real good receiver. And a guy who I think is going to go on day 3, Josh Kelly from Texas Tech with transfer of Washington State. He goes 6 foot 1.5 inch, 195 pounds, 4.55. He's not a great athlete, but he's a terrific receiver. I mean, phenomenal receiver. Runs good routes, catches the ball with fantastic fundamentals, knows where the quarterback is, works well with the quarterback. Again, Kelly's probably going to be a day 3 pick. He's going to get lost in the mix, but I can absolutely see him developing into a number 3 receiver at the next level.
Moody's is a proud partner of the New York Giants, uniting the brightest minds to turn today's risk into tomorrow's opportunities. Learn more at Moody's.com. All right, guys, let's get to the quarterbacks. A lot of fans out there are always looking for the next great thing at quarterback. You already mentioned Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward. I think it's very messy. I think the quarterback class in general is a little bit messy because none of these guys are perfect. I don't think any of these guys this year, and you guys can correct me in your analysis if you think I'm wrong, would get picked higher than the top 3 guys in last year's class. How do you see this class past Ward and Sanders, Ewers, Beck, go down the list, Kyle, and how this thing might develop this year?
Yeah, I think the guy I'm most excited about after those top 2 is actually Garrett Nussmeier from LSU, who's coming off a really bad close of game against Texas A&M on the road. He's done that more than once this season, kind of put the team in some holes or not performed well for a significant stretch of an individual game. He played in 18 games, but only started 1 coming into this season. He's the son of NFL quarterbacks coach Doug Nussmeier, so he's got kind of NFL impression throughout his life, and you could see that in some of the nuance that he plays with, despite not being a well-tenured player at the position. And LSU's got some talent with the pass catchers with Mason Taylor at tight end and Kyron Lacey at wide receiver, but they don't have one of these loaded skill groups. You see a lot of really good pocket management. You see enough athleticism. You see really good anticipation throws at times. It's the decision-making and post-snap confirmation of stuff where he's getting trapped with some coverages. He's not picking up the safety rotation with consistency the way that he needs to. But I think there's a lot there that in the right situation, you can get a quality NFL starter out of him. I've wanted to be in on Carson Beck, but it's just really been a mundane season for him. I think the tools for Jalen Milroe are really fascinating. I'd say Drew Allers made a nice leap in his game from Penn State. The one guy I cannot get there at all with is Quinn Ewers from Texas. I really struggle with, I don't think he has any physical attributes that he can particularly hang his hat on and say, this is where I win as a player. And I think his process and the way that Texas has called games this year, as far as not being aggressive to work the ball down the field, he's been very ineffective on air yard throws further than 10 yards downfield all season long. And it feels like Texas is really operating within a box offensively, very close to the line of scrimmage, not trusting or asking him to make those progression throws down the field. And the contrast, we've seen what it looks like with Arch Manning this year. And the offense is more open when Manning's on the field. So I don't even know that Ewers is the best quarterback on his own roster, let alone somebody that should be in the conversation, I think, for a top 100 selection at the quarterback position.
Well, you and Tony can hold hands on the Quinn Ewers analysis, but he's been saying the same thing to me for about 3 months, Tony. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, just the inability to quickly make a decision, pull the trigger. I think that's what kills him. I think Drew Allard, I love Drew Allard coming into the season, just really hasn't excited me. They play Ohio State this weekend. We'll see what happens there. I think Connor Weigman of Texas A&M has shown some good things since he's been back from injury. We'll see if he can continue to capitalize. But I think even when you get past the top guys, the rest of the class, whether it be Riley Leonard, KJ Jefferson, Kyle McCord of Syracuse, has been a disaster. And that was a guy when he took over last season at Ohio State, people were saying, top 45 pick. I mean, he looks like he may fall out of the draft. The Donovan Smith of Houston. I mean, that was a guy that scouts were talking about. 6'4", 237 pounds, very athletic, huge arm. People were talking about before the season, this guy could pop off the film. He's popped. He's popped onto the bench. His play has been so poor this year. So it's really, we talk about the guys at the top. There's been really nobody except for Nussmeier and I think Weigman, Texas A&M, when he's healthy, who have shown that they're much better in 2024 than they were in 2023.
All right, I'm going to let you guys make a prediction. How many, Kyle, we'll start with you, and then Tony, you give your number. How many first-round quarterbacks get drafted in the 2025 draft?
I'd set the over-under at 3.5 and probably take the under. It really depends on who comes out, too. Nussmeier's got an extra year of eligibility.
He should go back, right? I mean, I think he should get some more experience, right?
So I think this is a double-edged sword because he may end up going to a place. I don't think he'd surpass the top two. Maybe you end up in a better situation. Like realistically, the Carolina Panthers, are they going to be in the quarterback market again this year? Do you want to go and play in Carolina? I know Dion's kind of not directly addressed Carolina, but talked about being selective with your situations. If you are a quarterback that can go into a situation where maybe you're the hedge or you're the developmental guy to take over for somebody long-term, it can maybe put you in a position where you're better off long-term. The other side of that coin, of course, is NIL and the opportunity to earn in college. And I'm sure LSU would not have a problem coming up with a competitive offer in that regard. So
no, I doubt it.
I could see it breaking either way, but it is a really fascinating decision that he will ultimately have to make, because typically those guys with small sample sizes, it's a big leap of faith. And we're just coming off the heels of the Colts this week, benching Anthony Richardson right before we hopped on here to talk together. And that was after 10 career starts in Indianapolis. And you knew he was super raw when he came out and had a small sample size.
Well, in fairness, he needed a rest. So now he'll get a rest, and we'll see how he does when he bounces back. Tony, Kyle put the over under at 3.5. What do you think?
I think it's going to probably be more like 5. Not that I think 5 should go in the first round, but I mean, let's look at history. I mean, except for the Kenny Pickens year, it's been 4, 5, 6 quarterbacks in the first round. We had 6 in the top 15 last year, and I think what's going to happen is we watch the film, we watch the play, and then all of a sudden these guys will perform incredibly well at the combine, and they'll show all the physical skills. And as I said time and time again, the coaches. You have an offensive-minded head coach who says, yeah, I'm going to take this guy and I'm going to turn his physical skills into on-the-field production. I think only 2, maybe 3 should go in the first round, but I think you could see as many as 5 because of the need at the position, because the way teams are willing to roll the dice at the position. I don't agree with it, but I think that's going to be the situation.
So, Tony, betting on mismanagement by NFL general managers
Absolutely.
is basically what you're doing there.
That's what that's the history, right? That's been the trend the past 20 years.
I think to Kyle's point, though, a lot of these guys are better off, man. You get drafted at 24, you can sit for a year and a half. You come into a better situation, you have a better chance to succeed. So we'll have to see how that ends up going. All right, larger look at the class here, guys. Kyle, we'll start with you. What is your favorite position group in this year's draft class right now, and why?
It's probably the cornerback class. I like the running back class a lot too. But at corner, Travis Hunter, Will Johnson at the top, Savon Revel, who we mentioned already from East Carolina. You still have really intriguing names. Jahdae Barron from Texas has had a really impactful stretch of play. You have Takario Davis as another big-bodied, long guy from Arizona. Benjamin Morrison, who was better last year, I thought, on tape before the season-ending injury that he had that kind of cut his year short. I like Maxwell Hairston from Kentucky, Jabbar Muhammad from Oregon, Mansour Delane from Virginia Tech is an interesting name. Like you can really come up with a lot of guys. Quincy Riley from Louisville can really move. That I think are fascinating players and all kinds of different profiles as far as height, weight, speed, short, quick-footed guys with low center of gravity, guys that can play positional versatility, me in the nickel or be outside. I just think it's dealer's choice in that position room with a lot of quality options. And as we've seen this massive influx over the past couple of years of wide receivers and how seemingly easy it is to find mid-round wide receivers that can come in and be capable contributors for an NFL team right off the jump. A class like this, I think, can kind of help be a nice counterbalance for a lot of those teams that need young guys that can move and have fresh legs in the secondary.
Tony, how about you? What's your favorite group?
I mean, I was going to pick cornerback, but when I look at the injuries, Will Johnson, who's been nicked up, Benjamin Morrison, Kyle mentioned Shannon Ravel of East Carolina. Denzel Burke has not played well. His game has gone in reverse. We've seen that in the past with Ohio State cornerbacks. Kyle mentioned Mansour Delane of Virginia Tech. I also like Dorian Strong. But I'm going to say I like the defensive tackle class, but I like the running back class a lot. I mean, Ashton Genty We've spoken about him a lot. I think Trevor Etienne of Georgia, when he's on the field, he's shown the ability to create yardage and basically just pull yards out of nowhere. Damian Martinez, I mean, transfers to Miami of Florida, figures he's going to be the number one back. He's now sharing time, but when he's given the ball, they can't pull him down. And as I said last show, that may be to his advantage because he's not going to have 200, 250 carries this year. So he's not going to have a lot of mileage on him, which could help him in the draft process. Or Marion Hampton of North Carolina is an outstanding player. Nick Singleton of Penn State. You got the duo at Ohio State with Trevion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. Kyle Manegi has been a little bit up and down this year, as has that entire Rutgers team. But I think it's a real good running back class. Obviously, it's head and shoulders above what we saw a year ago, where the first quarter running back taken was a guy coming off a knee injury in the second round. It was primarily third and fourth round picks. Where do these guys go? I mean, a couple of these guys at the top are worthy of first round picks. I think Genty will be a first round pick. I think ATN, Martinez, and Hampton are going to go off the board somewhere in the early middle part of round 2.
Moody's is a proud partner of the New York Giants. The code RISK, unlock opportunity. Learn more at Moody's.com. Draft season is presented by Moody's. Kyle, you mentioned you like the running back position as well. I want to give you a chance to talk about some of those guys. And I don't know if you have like position rankings, if you want to put them in a list for me, or just talk about some of the guys that you really like at that running back spot.
Yeah, I'd also invoke the name Caleb Johnson from Iowa as a really good, like the Shanahan offenses are really going to love him as a wide zone runner. They got a pretty good offensive line there at Iowa, but he's a bigger body guy who does pretty well to press the line of scrimmage and is capable of some dynamic cuts. Dylan Sampson from Tennessee, I think he's almost at 20 rushing touchdowns already this year, like crazy production that he's had. And then even like a little bit deeper, a guy like RJ Harvey, was once upon a time a quarterback who converted to play the running back position and has low center of gravity, runs angry, he's explosive. I think DJ Giddens from Kansas State has made a nice jump this year as far as being a little bit more decisive when he cuts and puts his foot in the ground. But the top guys for me, it's Genty. I like Nick Singleton for what he brings on passing downs to kind of help make up for some of the frustrating inconsistencies at times where he could be a little explosive run reliant, which, that height, weight, speed, physical freak from Penn State at the running back position. You've seen that before as far as being a little explosive play reliant, but what he does in the passing game, as far as both pass protection and catching the football, I think helps his profile quite a bit. I like Marion Hampton at my 3 spot. And then Caleb Johnson and Quinshon Judkins for me would probably round out my top 5 right now.
And then, Tony, you mentioned defensive tackle. Running back and defensive tackle are 2 spots that I think we've really kind of had a bit of a dearth of talent over the last couple of years, and both those position groups are making a bit of a comeback this year, finally.
Sort of. I mean, you don't have any knockout top defensive tackle. It's going to be a top 10 pick, maybe not even a top 12 pick, but I think there is some depth when you get middle round 1, really through day 2. I like Deion Walker of Kentucky. I think everybody should like Deion Walker of Kentucky. He's a big guy who makes plays. I like both of the Michigan guys, Mason Graham as well as Kenneth Grant. I think Graham is more NFL ready. He's more polished. He's explosive. He's nastier. But I think Grant is the better athlete. Grant has got much better upside. I think Walter Nolan has shown a lot of good things at Mississippi this year, especially in the last couple of weeks. Mentioned Tyleik Williams at Ohio State. He's the only guy on that Ohio State defensive front that seems to have a nonstop motor, and he's athletic. He's more than a gap occupier. He can get down the line outside the box and make plays. TJ Sanders, South Carolina, has not been consistent this year, but he's shown flashes of next level, of really top next level ability. Bear Alexander, the 1-gap-3 technique defensive tackle out of USC. I like Jordan Phillips out of Maryland, the big punch in the mouth type of nose tackle, zero technique tackle, if you will. And Yahya Black of Iowa. I mean, here's a guy who's big. He's athletic. He can make plays on the ball. He can occupy the blockers. Has a bit of upside. Needs to take his game to the next level, but definitely has got a lot of next level stuff.
And Kyle, defensive tackles in the NFL becoming more important, right? A, you want to get pass rush up the middle. But B, as you play more and more of these 2 safety deep shell coverages, you need your front to be able to stop the run on their own because you're not going to bring help down there to give them extra guys in the box.
Yeah, you're looking at more and more, 6.5 man box counts, especially as you live in the nickel, and those guys that can really control and deconstruct blocks go a long way. Whether that's a nose tackle, you're seeing that with the Tennessee Titans and Tavondre Sweat, who's been really impactful for them as far as occupying space and allowing the guys behind you to run free and holding the point of attack, or guys that can kind of lock, peek, shed, and deconstruct blocks off their own, which I think that's a little bit more of the style of play that Mason Graham has. He reminds me a good bit of Christian Wilkins coming out of Clemson, as far as the pass rush profile feels a little better than the production's been, but he's really good on running downs. He plays with leverage. Sometimes the pads get up a little bit, but when that clicks into place, I think he can be a 3-down, high-volume snap taker. And that's really the missing link as far as some of these interior guys going early. You get the whole positional value is starting to come around, but then it's, well, we want to rotate up front. We want to keep our guys fresh up front. Are you going to play enough snaps to really justify a premium draft selection? And there's going to only be a certain number of guys on the interior when you're that big that play with that motor and that endurance to justify that. And I think that could be a big tiebreaker for some of these guys in this kind of crowded block on day 2 and that Tony's talking about.
All right, guys, I want to take two position groups and kind of put them together because they face each other. The offensive tackle and edge rusher groups. I think before the year, early in this draft process, we thought that could be a real strength of this class. I saw multiple offensive tackles mocked in the top 10, multiple edge rushers mocked in the top 10. Yet when we guys talked about it at the start of the show, not one offensive tackle was mentioned. Tony mentioned Will Campbell as maybe a fringe guy. And all the edge guys we talked about at the start of the year, we haven't talked about them much either. Kyle, have we seen those two position groups just kind of not live up to what the hype was when the season started?
Well, I think the hype from the summer was guys at blue blood programs that are highly recruited players that have been multi-year starters that you're kind of just hoping on the athleticism really clicking into place and the jump happening. And I think about the tackle class in particular, where it was kind of a 2-horse race with Will Campbell and Kelvin Banks. And I think both of those guys, some of the same questions exist. I have questions if Will Campbell projects better at guard or tackle in the NFL. As a guy who he plays with good power. He's super dense, but he's not super long. I think he's better when he's playing forward and in a phone booth. And I think you've seen, go put on the South Carolina tape. I mean, they stressed him off the edge at times throughout the course of that game. And South Carolina's got a couple of good pass rushers, but they're the kind that you're going to find in the NFL. It looked like maybe Josh Simmons from Ohio State could have interjected himself into that conversation, but he suffered a season-ending injury. So that felt like a really big gut punch for the tackle class in particular. And on the edge, it's kind of the same thing where guys were projections. James Pierce is super lean and explosive and bendy, and everybody on the internet that follows college football and the draft, they love guys that can run full speed under the kitchen table and bend the edge, but there's more to it. And Pierce has turned it on a little bit in SEC play, but he started slow. Michael Williams, for this freakish arm length that he has, was a really buzzy player. He logged his first sacks of the season against Texas, and he started slow, and he had an ankle injury that he had to deal with and missed a little bit of time. Abdul Carter, I know Tony mentioned him. I would agree with Tony as far as like the outlook on Abdul Carter, but there's certain defensive schemes that I don't think I would trust with Abdul Carter to get the most out of him. If you're going to play him in a wide 9 as a defensive end and just ask him to rush the passer, I think you're leaving a lot on the table with him. So I think he's somebody that maybe you need a little bit more of a firm vision with to maximize what he's really capable of. And that might not be for everybody when you get down to the actual evaluation of the player.
Tony, your thoughts on those two groups and whether or not they've kind of met early season expectations?
Well, I think Kelvin Banks did early on, but he said he really struggled the past couple of weeks. And if we talked about Kelvin Banks, I mean, he may not even be 6'4", so he projects to guard. Same thing with Josh Connerly of Oregon. Terrific college left tackle, but just does not have dimensions to stay at tackle, on Sunday, which is what's going to be very interesting to see on draft day. I mean, if these guys come with good arm length, but they don't measure up, 6'4" and a half, whatever, are they drafted as tackles or are they drafted as guards? Diego Pounds, the North Carolina transfer who transferred to Mississippi, played left tackle, has had his struggles at times. Kyle mentioned Josh Simmons, and there were a lot of people thought Josh Simmons was going to be a first-round pick. hurt his knee in that Oregon game. He's done for the year, and it's kind of really there's no one that's really exciting after that. The kid from Minnesota, Ursary, has been up and down.
Mm-hmm.
Armand Membu of Missouri, real good right tackle, but he's 6'3". He's going to be a guard, so I think that's an issue. As far as the edge class is concerned, I think the X factor here is Jalen Walker of Georgia, who has really jumped off the charts. A lot like Abdul Carter in that he's multi-versatile. He can do a lot of different things. He can force the action up the field, or you can get him to drop off the line and play in space, 10, 15 yards down the field when the ball is in the air. And a guy whose game is really taken off. I mean, he was a situational reserve last year at Georgia. He moved into the starting lineup, and I think he's just getting better and better and more explosive, and really took over when Mikael Williams was having those injury problems. So that is a guy, Jalen Walker of Georgia, you got to keep an eye on.
All right, Kyle, any other position groups or guys that you want to bring up and mention that maybe we haven't touched on?
I would look at the safety class as another group that has some really intriguing players and maybe a little bit more important. I know the spacing of it has changed when you go on from a lot of the cover 3 stuff about a decade ago and the Legion of Boom and the Earl Thomases of the world, and you're not really looking for that anymore. But guys that have versatility, alignment versatility, can play in the box, can play in the nickel, can play on the roof, guys that can do all that kind of stuff. Those are the guys now that I think move the needle. And Malachi Starks from Georgia is I think head and shoulders the best one of the group. He's capable of doing just about anything that you could ask for. Penn State has a talented one in Kevin Winston, who's been banged up a little bit this year. So I'm kind of watching to see if there's a bounce back in store for him. Keon Sabb transferred from Michigan to Alabama, showcased his toughness. He played almost a whole game with a broken foot, but he was really popping before he ended up getting hurt. And Nick Imamori from South Carolina is a supersized 6'3", 225 pounds. Makes some plays on the ball too. Some really nice stuff where he's aligned underneath and getting into hook curl throwing windows, and can really fly and has a lot of length for his tackle radius. Billy Bowman from Oklahoma is an undersized player that just can't seem to get away from the football. I think that's not something that you could sleep on, but I do think his stature does hurt his profile a little bit when you project him to the next level. And then I'd give a shout out to Kamari Ramsey from USC as well as another guy that has just been a big time playmaker for the Trojans on their back end. So I think the safety group, maybe these guys don't get drafted super high because it's the new defensive running backs that we're just not going to put a ton of emphasis there. But I don't think it's a coincidence that some of the better defenses in the league have guys that can do a lot of different things with your personnel, and you don't have to churn your personnel over to try and match whatever an opposing offense is trying to do.
And Tony, same thing with inside off-ball linebackers, right? Like it's a group that teams don't use high picks on anymore. A lot like safety. If you look at the franchise tag numbers, that number's low, just like, it gets brought up as they consider the edge guys to be linebackers. But generally speaking, inside linebackers and safeties don't get paid in the NFL level.
They don't, but you do have some decent 3-down linebackers this year. Danny Stutzman of Oklahoma, who stacks well against the run. He gives it up against the blitz. He can play in space. Barrett Carter seems to be the forgotten guy out of Clemson, decided to go back. He's super explosive, great in pursuit, can run down the field in coverage. Nick Martin of Oklahoma State is just having a knockout year. You want to talk about an explosive guy who impacts the game up the field, but is also good in space, in coverage, and pursuit. Jamin Dumas-Johnson, the Georgia transfer who went to Kentucky, is having a solid year. I also like Schmeelk Mondin Jr., not the biggest guy, not the most athletic, but very instinctive and always puts himself in a position to make plays on the ball.
All right, final question for both of you guys. First overall pick, give me a prediction for next year's draft. If it's a quarterback and if it's not a quarterback. So you can give me 2 names. Kyle, let's start with you.
I will go. If it's a quarterback, I think it will be Cam Ward. I think the gene that he has to make plays outside of structure, nothing's never too fast for him. I think he has a little bit more athletically and arm talent-wise to lean on than Shedeur does. So I would go Cam Ward at quarterback. And if I were to go non-quarterback, I will go with the guy who can answer a problem for you on offense or defense, and I'll go with Travis Hunter, who I think the sky's the limit for him on either side. I think his ceiling is higher at corner, but the money's higher at wide receiver. So which way does that ultimately go? That'll be a fun storyline to watch unfold too.
Well, I'm not letting you get off the hook, dude. Is he going to get drafted as a corner or as a receiver, or will it be a team that says, look, we're going to play him at corner and we'll get you 15 snaps in wide receiver? How do you think that's going to work?
That should be how it goes. I think you should play him to be full-time at corner because the instincts there and the fluidity and the transitional quickness, I think that's much more rare. I think he's a really good wide receiver, but I think the package he can be at corner is really rare. A lot of the instinctual plays that he makes as far as being able to leverage multiple routes at the same time, in anticipating where the ball is going, knowing when he has help to make those aggressive plays on the ball, that's where he moves the needle most for me. And then if you want to let him do that for a year or two and then say, hey, we'll do the Devin Hester thing and we'll get you some packages for stuff to get some action on the other side, we can do that down the road. That's how I would handle it if I was the team.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that makes sense. Tony, your thoughts on the Hunter thing, and then you can give me your first quarterback pick and your first non-quarterback pick if you had to guess right now as of October 29th.
In my opinion, Hunter right now is a better receiver than he is a cornerback. Now, cornerback obviously is a priority position, but I still think he needs work at that position, especially making plays with his back to the ball. As far as the first quarterback, Cam Ward fits everything that I like in a quarterback. And what I look is for guys who are on the upswing, guys who are playing their best football, come draft time, a la Jaden Daniels from a year ago.
And Tony, I like the fact that he's a fifth-year quarterback and he's played a lot of football. That's a good thing to me.
And the jump that he made between 2023 and 2024, in my opinion, is outstanding, especially between the ears, because you always knew, you watched him at Washington State, he always had the physical skills. He still sprays some of his passes, and he's got to work on that accuracy, that pass placement, but it's better than it was the prior 2 years, and just his whole handling of the offense is incredible. That said, I'm going to go with Shedeur Sanders as my number one quarterback, just because I think he's got better escapability. He's got the same physical skills. He's got the bloodlines, which may work against him, but he's been a real good quarterback for 3 years. Tries to do too much, tries to take too much on his shoulders. I also think that oftentimes when you watch those Colorado games, he's staring down Travis Hunter too much, and he's missing other receivers. Maybe his old man needs to kick him in the butt and say, hey, spread the ball around. He seems to have done that better the past couple of games. As far as non-quarterbacks, I think Kyle picked made the fashionable pick with Travis Hunter. I'm going to go with Abdul Carter. Reminds me a lot of LeVar Arrington. Reminds me of the Micah Parsons type of player, that impact defensive player. And I think when there is, a draft where there isn't superior talent at the top, you may get a surprise like Abdul Carter going that early.
I like it. Gentlemen, enjoy the rest of the college football season. Kyle, we'll catch up with you again once we get through the season. We get to the All-Star games. Look forward to seeing you out there, and best of luck with everything you're doing with the 33rd team.
Thank you very much. It was great catching up with you guys.
For Kyle, for Tony Pauline from SportsKeeda.com, I am John Schmeelk. This has been Draft Season presented by Moody's, a proud partner of the New York Giants. Decode risk, unlock opportunity. Learn more at Moody's.com. We'll see you next time, everybody.
You go into your shower feeling, but as soon as you reach for the Irish Spring, your day immediately gets better. That crisp, fresh, unmistakable Irish Spring scent zings your brain and awakens your senses. So when you finally emerge from the shower, 37 minutes later, because you pay the water bill so you can stay in there as long as you want, you're ready to take on the day and smell great doing it. Irish Spring Body Wash and Bar Soap. Fresh, green, Irish. Shop now at Walmart.